When you think of worldwide sports car racing over the last 50 years or so, one name comes immediately to mind: Porsche. And now in the new millennium, every 3 years, Porsche people from around the world gather to celebrate all things Porsche, and you've got a special invitation. Welcome to Rennsport Reunion 3 at Daytona International Speedway. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Rennsport means racing. And with that in mind, our featured models this year are the most decorated Porsche race car ever, the 956, and its American cousin, the 962, and perhaps the most awesome racing Porsche ever built, the 917. And we probably have your favorite racing Porsche here. Why? Because look around me. We have the biggest gathering of 917s, 956s, and 962s ever gathered at a single racetrack. In the next 60 minutes, we hope to bring you a taste of everything that makes up a Rennsport reunion. And with that in mind, let's meet my co-host, Derek Bell.
Thanks, Bob. Yes, I'm very fortunate and privileged enough to have actually been a driver in a Porsche 917 and a 956 and a 962. And in fact, won my first race for Porsche in a 917 with Joe Sibert in Buenos Aires in Argentina in 1971. My last long distance race was in this wonderful car with John Andretti and Bob Wallach in 1989. In the last race of the really serious IMSA racing, when Group C cars and IMSA cars were part of the championship.
Porsche's first overall victory at a 24-hour race came here at Daytona in 1968. Later that year, the company unveiled the car that would conquer Le Mans, the 917. The car that transformed Porsche from a giant killer to a giant in its own right on the worldwide racing stage. Immediately following the 1967 Le Mans 24-hour race, the FIA created a new Production Sports Car Championship category, which allowed engines up to 5 liters of displacement. Initially, homologation rules called for at least 50 cars to be built. Just a year later, hoping to encourage manufacturer participation, the FIA cut that number in half.
And at that point, Porsche said, we can build 25 917s.
I don't think they thought for one moment that anybody would have the balls to actually go out and build 25 cars like that.
For the first time, Porsche had a chance to be the world champions.
Ferdinand Piëch, grandson of company founder Ferdinand Porsche, was the man in charge of the brand's motorsports programs. Piëch supervised 10 months of intense development work, after which the swoopy 917 made its first public appearance at the Geneva Auto Show in 1969.
I just fell in love with it right away. It was big, curvy, powerful.
The next challenge for Porsche was to produce 25 complete 917s for the homologation inspectors.
Porsche then was a very small company. What happened was they literally had everybody who could physically handle a wrench bolting them together.
1 month later, 25 complete cars with engines, gearboxes and wheels were standing, ready for the FIA inspection.
The 917 was based on the 908 model's wheelbase and tubular chassis, with power from an all-new 12-cylinder engine.
The power it had was unbelievable. I'd experienced similar power with other cars, but this was greater than any of them.
200 miles an hour was about as fast as any of us had ever been. And suddenly the first 917 was doing over 220.
There was no downforce or anything to hold the car back, so it was a beast to start with.
At the end of the Mulsanne Straight, for example, we couldn't just come straight off the gas pedal and straight off the brake pedal, because when we did that, the rear of the car would just heave itself up into the air and the back would start steering the front.
Following that Le Mans test, the 917 was taken to Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium to run in competition for the very first time.
And so Mitter and Schultz were given the enviable job of starting it. Everybody has always believed that they didn't really want to do it. So Mitter simply blew the engine up on the line, basically, so they didn't actually have to drive it.
Coming up, the 917 makes its debut at Le Mans. Hurley Haywood mixes it up on track. And later, the world's only Concours de Sport at Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3.
If you're into sports cars, you're into perfection, you're into Porsches.
Looking at all the nice cars that y'all got here, it's actually really cool.
The Porsche Club of America turned out in force for Rennsport Reunion 3. Formed in 1955, the PCA is the largest Porsche club in the world and one of, if not the largest, independent single-mark sports car clubs in existence, with more than 57,000 primary members. It's become a tradition to dedicate each Rennsport reunion to someone who has made a significant contribution to Porsche's proud racing history, someone who has honored the reputation of the Porsche brand, a true Porsche person. Rennsport Reunion 3 was dedicated to the memory of Bob Snodgrass, President and CEO of Brumos Porsche in Jacksonville, Florida, and a committed supporter of Porsche racing. Bob's widow Susan and son Harris accepted on his behalf. In the Group 1 race for 2.5-liter engines and under, Hurley Haywood started his 1970 Porsche 914 6 GTR alongside Josh Vargo on the front row and took the early lead. In the late 1960s, Haywood was brought into the Brumos team by Peter Gregg, who won 53 races and 8 championships, many of them co-driving with Haywood. Justin Bell is with one of their teammates.
It's very easy to forget when you see these amazing cars and the famous drivers that behind the scenes are some very talented people that make them work and make these cars gain their success. I'm here with Jack Atkinson, who is Peter Gregg's mechanic, engineer, everything really.
Yeah, when we started in racing, we didn't have big crews. You know, it was maybe 3 or 4 people. I was the crew chief, the team manager, the engine builder, the transmission man, the paint and body man.
Peter Gregg had such an amazing legacy. Just in one short sentence, kind of sum up for you the working relationship.
Well, Peter's philosophy was we don't leave for the racetrack until the car is ready. When we get there, we're ready to race, and we only go for one reason, to win.
Speaking of winning, that's just what Josh Vargo and his 72 Porsche 911 ST did in Group 1, bettering the 5-time Rolex 24 at Daytona champion Haywood.
Good job.
That was fun.
Yeah. Phoenix, Arizona's Frank Beck finished 3rd in his 914 6. Congratulations, Josh. Here's a look at some of the beautiful 917s on hand in Daytona. Now let's get back to the story of the car's evolution. 1969 marked the final year that the drivers ran to their cars at Le Mans. It was also the first year the mighty 917 competed at the famed 24-hour race.
When I first drove it, I nicknamed it the undrivable monster. But in fact, it was drivable as long as you learned about the car.
Vic Elford and co-driver Richard Atwood qualified just off the pace of the pole-sitting number 14 917 driven by Rolf Stommelen and Kurt Ahrens, which took the early lead. The Stommelen-Ahrens car lasted longer than expected, but still retired after 14 hours. Elford and Atwood assumed the lead and drove away.
We drove the car with kid gloves. The car was so fast that when we got to 21 hours, we were leading by 50 miles, and then it broke.
Porsche's hopes for victory then rested with the 908, driven by Hans Hermann and Gerard Larousse. After swapping the lead with the John Wyer Automotive Ford GT40 of Jackie Ickx and Jackie Oliver, Hermann and Larousse finished runners-up in the closest ever finish at Le Mans. While the 917's debut was impressive, it was about to get better. The car's notorious handling issues were solved at a test in August of 1969 at Zeltweg, Austria, ironically with the help of the same team that had beaten Porsche at Le Mans just months earlier.
The car still wasn't right, and so by now John Wyer and his crew had got involved with the project.
And of course, in those days, it's a very simple test. You put drop oil on the body and you watch where it goes. John Horseman, the chief engineer for John Wyer, he said, we suggest, that you put aluminum across the top and some plywood and some duct tape and make the back straight. Immediately, the car was 3 seconds faster.
Thus, the 917's iconic short-tail body style was born. The 917K, for Kurtz, German for short, went on to win the majority of the races in the World Championship of Makes in 1970 and 71. There's more to come. We'll hear how David Hobbs's car won the 1970 Le Mans race, and later, a top-secret 16-cylinder prototype never before seen on American soil. More from Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3 in a moment.
I've been trying to find this book, and I wanted to have it signed by all of the Porsche drivers from that era, and Vic Elford was one of them. And so he did, and I've got it now.
Just got an autograph from Brian Redmond. Earlier I got one from Hurley Haywood on one of our special hats.
I I hit 50 this year, and my wife knows that I'm a Porsche nut because obviously she's joined me on a lot of these events, and she bought me this old tag watch that's a tribute to Steve McQueen in the movie Le Mans. Hopefully I can get Richard Atwood's autograph on the watch band.
By 1970, Porsche had developed a more powerful 5-liter engine for its 917. At the same time, a different sort of power struggle was taking place between John Wyer, owner of Porsche's contracted factory team, and company racing boss Ferdinand Piëch.
Piëch was involved with his great ambitions, but his great ambitions were beginning to cost money.
I'm sure partially for financial and administrative reasons, Porsche formed a partnership with John Wyer.
Piëch decided that whilst that might be the official factory team, he was going to be still in major control of what actually was going on.
Piëch did so through the privateer Porsche Salzburg team, which was owned by his mother. The team turned up at Le Mans with a unique long-tailed 917, leaving Wyer's Gulf Oil team with the short tail.
John Wyer's reaction right from the word go was, you can't do that, we are the factory team. And for the next 2 years it led to almost fisticuffs between him and Piëch wherever we went.
Vic Elford qualified on pole, the first man to lap Le Mans at better than 150 miles per hour. The two intra-company rivals swapped the lead in what became a very wet race with high attrition. At 2 a.m., Joe Siffert and Brian Redman in the Gulf car held the top spot by nearly 5 laps. Then Siffert made a costly error.
3 slower cars, they were all trying to pass each other, and absolutely in front of the Porsche pit. I mean, if you timed it, you couldn't have done it any better. He missed a gear, and the engine went whop, and that's it.
With the front-runners out, the second Porsche Salzburg car, driven by Richard Atwood and Hans Hermann, using the less powerful 4.5-liter engine, became the surprise leaders.
After qualifying, we were way down. We were out of it completely. We were losing something like at least 6 seconds a lap.
With Ferry Porsche and Ferdinand Piëch looking on, Atwood and Hermann cruised to the overall victory, their first, as well as Porsche's, at Le Mans.
You know, I wasn't elated to have won the race, and the fact that it was Porsche's first win at Le Mans also didn't immediately hit me either. And it was some years later that the significance came, and I don't really know why. If I hadn't won, I wouldn't be fated, I'm sure, the way that I have been, and, you know, thank God I did.
The dynamic duo, Hobbs and Hailwood. We qualified this car about 14th for the 1970 race. Of course, it only had the 4.5-litre, not the 5-litre engine, which the better cars had. But still in all, it was in with a fighting chance, and by about 7 o'clock in the evening, we were already up to 3rd place in the rain. Mike was driving, and he was pretty good in the rain. Unfortunately, he had a bit of a senior moment going through the Dunlop curve and ran into a car that had crashed already about 2 laps before. So he should have known it was there. So that was our day done, unfortunately. Well, the first part of the day, we actually went back to the Hotel de France at La Charte and had a hell of an evening, but of course we were out of the race. To make sure this number goes down in history, of course, in Steve McQueen's film Le Mans, this number does in fact win the race.
Well, Porsche is all about icons, and almost none bigger hit than Chad McQueen here. Chad, it's great to see you back at Daytona.
It's great to be here. I mean, as you can see, there's every type of Porsche you can imagine here, and it's fabulous. Great event. It just feels comfortable. You know what I mean? Everybody like you, your dad, David Piper, Vic Elford.
When obviously, you know, your family lineage, my family, it all came together in the making of the film Le Mans. Our helmet colours, both my dad's and mine, stem from these Gulf colours. And obviously walking around, you must just be blown away by almost the merchandise and everything.
I mean, you see Gulf jackets everywhere, like your dad, my dad wore it. I mean, it's great, fantastic. And I don't know what it is about this color combination, but when I got back from Le Mans when we were kids, I had to have wallpaper like that. That's what a big impression it made on me.
The film also left an impression on the future head of Porsche's worldwide racing programs, Hartmut Christen.
I got much more insight, knowledge about motorsports from that movie when I saw it first time in 1971 or 72. Because in these days you didn't see that much about racing on TV. That really created some interest in me in getting deeper into it.
Another film buff affected by Le Mans was comedian Jerry Seinfeld, owner of this 917, Chassis 22. Porsche won many championships in 2007, including the Grand Am Rolex GT Series. The Group 3 race for Porsche Cup cars at Rennsport was dominated by Rolex regulars. Lee Keen led every lap for the victory over Dirk Werner, who won the Rolex GT driver and manufacturer's crowns for Porsche. Steve Johnson finished third. Congratulations, Lee, on your first place trophy. Coming up, Derek Bell is in for a surprise when he joins the John Wyer team.
Is this really what sports car racing is about?
And later, we'll commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Porsche 956. Stay with us. Rennsport Reunion 3 will return in just a moment. Welcome back to Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3 at Daytona. The late 1960s and early 70s was a very dangerous era in racing. The cars were as fast, if not faster, than today's, but track and car safety were primitive. That was the world entered by a young aspiring driver named Derek Bell.
In those days, I mean, there's a list, I think it was a list of 20 drivers, only 4 of us alive.
The difference between a Formula One car and a 917 at Spa in 1970 was 10 seconds a lap. The 917 is 10 seconds faster.
But I tell you what, you didn't sleep well the night before the race. You saw some very nervous drivers on the grid in those days.
At the end of the 1970 season, having won the World Championship with the Gulf Porsche team, Brian Redmond retired from active competition.
You know, most racing drivers, they feel that they're invulnerable and nothing will ever happen to them, but I never felt like that. I always felt something's going to happen to me.
Redmond's departure left a vacancy at the famed Gulf Oil team.
I didn't know much about sports car racing at that time because all I wanted to be was a Grand Prix driver. So when Brian left, I didn't really realise he'd gone off. All I know is I had a call saying, come and do a test drive for us. So I went along, and there was Ronnie Peterson there, who to me was probably the star driver of that era, and he was, about to be world champion. And Peter Gethin, who Peter and I were, I think, pretty similar in our abilities, and some reason or other I got the drive. Now, I'll never know to this day why I did. Whether it's because I spoke English better than Ronnie, I'm not sure. But I'm sure it wasn't through sheer speed.
The sports car rookie was soon in awe of his new teammates, Pedro Rodriguez and Joe Sifford.
They were folklore as far as their names and their reputations in sports car racing.
Sifford and Rodriguez have a tremendous rivalry. On the track, they were always hitting each other. There's a famous photograph taken at Eau Rouge of them actually touching each other, banging each other on the first lap.
An early eye-opener for Bell came during testing at Daytona in January of 1971.
Remember, there was no chicane at the racetrack in those days. So we were coming down at sort of a little over 200, 215 miles an hour and going flat into the banking. And as they went around, the car would normally go around the banking like that, sort of level in the second to third line, the way we do now. But in those days, because we didn't have any ground effect or really any great aerodynamics, the car was actually going around in an attitude. So it was going around like that all the way around. It was quite unbelievable. I went, have I really got to drive like that? Is this really what sports car racing's about?
One of the big draws of Rennsport is the accessibility, not just to the amazing racing cars, but to the famous drivers. Now behind me you see one of 3 lines in the autograph session where people have paid $25 each towards charity. By the sounds of it, it's one of the highlights of everyone's day. You're in the Stars of Today and Tomorrow section. Any particular reason?
Just because it gives you an opportunity to see all the guys sitting at the same table, and you basically see in person the guys that you've seen pictures of over the years.
Derek Bell, I mean, who can't love him? He's the most amazing driver I've ever seen.
Derek who?
Derek Bell.
I'll look him up. I'll Google him later.
You should.
So who are you looking forward to?
I want to see Vic Elford, I want to see Derek Bell and David Hobbs. So I get to finally meet him after 37 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think that's what this event's about, isn't it?
You can walk up to all the heroes you see on the grid. And the best part is they look like they're having a blast doing it. It's like a high school reunion.
You have a relatively unique name, and how did you come about it?
Named him after Dale Holbert and Derek Bell, and we came here specifically to get a picture with Derek Bell and get him to sign it, and we've gotten that done, and I'm just absolutely ecstatic that he was so helpful in doing that.
So give us the full name then. What is it?
Alan Derek Demler.
We love that. Excellent.
Another one-of-a-kind car here at Rennsport is the famous Pink Pig, a 917-20 in a color that led to a tongue-in-cheek decision to paint cuts of meat into its livery. It ran at Le Mans in 1971, an unsuccessful compromise between the long and short-tail body styles. We'll have more on that race in a moment. And later on, the mightiest 917 of them all, David Donahue tries out his father Mark's Can-Am 917-30. Welcome back to Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3. 59 cars took the green flag for the Group 2 race for non-turbo Porsche 911s. The best of the bunch? Eric Lux and his 1975 Porsche 911 RSR. He was joined on the podium by Christopher Musanti and Jake Vargo in a rare 911 IROC racer. Congratulations, Eric. By 1971, the FIA's lack of minimum weight requirements meant that sports cars were getting lighter and faster. In April of that year, Derek Bell tested a magnesium chassis 917 that weighed fully 109 pounds less than a standard aluminum version.
Norbert Singer said to me, "So Derek, what revs were you pulling on the straight?" So I said, 8,100. Then he gets his little slide rule out, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he starts to laugh. He said, "I'm calculating your top speed." He said, "Whoa, I think it's better you don't know." 396 kilometers, which is 246 miles an hour. And that's what we did every lap in the race.
By 1971, the Porsche Salzburg team had been sold to Martini Racing. Their 917 Longtail for Le Mans, in the hands of Vic Elford and Gerard Larousse, started second, sandwiched by a pair of Gulfoil John Wyer Longtails, Joe Sifford and Derek Bell in third, and the Pedro Rodriguez-Jackie Oliver car on pole.
One of the advantages of having Martini as a sponsor was that the combination of Martini colours and the shape of that car led to what I think was the most beautiful race car ever built.
Yet just past the halfway point, all three of those cars had retired. The number 22 Martini entry for Dr. Helmut Marko and Gijs van Lennep won by 2 laps, setting new 24-hour speed and distance records in the process. Ironically, the winning car was the very same one Derek Bell had tested just 2 months earlier for Porsche.
There was one thing they told us, not before the race, but after the race, that this was a very special one because it has a magnesium chassis. It's not too safe car, feet in front of the axles, the little tubes, but very light. And okay, if you win it, you don't complain, do you?
1971 marked Porsche's second consecutive overall at Le Mans. But FIA rule changes downsizing engines meant further victories would have to come elsewhere, such as the Can-Am series in North America. In parallel with turbocharging the 917's 12-cylinder engine for the Can-Am, Porsche engineers secretly built this 917 with a 16-cylinder engine. Rennsport marks this unique Porsche's first ever visit to America.
At first we want to make this car for Can-Am with 16-cylinder to beat the McLarens, but we saw immediately that all the future is in turbo. And we tested only one time on a Friday afternoon in '69 in Weissach. Lovely noise, but not enough power, and so the car was history.
Now there's more to Rennsport than just vintage cars. Justin Bell has proof.
Just take a look at this Cayenne rally car from the Trans-Siberia Rally. This vehicle did almost 4,500 miles of the most grueling driving you'd ever imagine. This is the actual race-winning car. And then, as a real treat for the fans here, they've got this GT2 Porsche, $190,000, 530 horsepower, and it's here 2 weeks ahead of the LA Auto Show. I mean, that's amazing. Anyone that knows anything about the car industry knows they keep these kind of things pretty close to their chests. And then the 911 Turbo Cabriolet, about 480 horsepower, and 1 week ahead of the Miami Auto Show, they're giving the fans here a chance to see it. I'm standing here with Lee Newton from Porsche North America. This is actually probably the most advanced seat you're likely to find these days.
Absolutely. We need a bucket seat for vehicles like our GT2 that you've seen here and the GT3s, as well as all for our club races. There's not many manufacturers that can produce a 5-point harness seat, bucket seat, which has got all the access points, that folds. Now what you can do is also get the kids in the back of the seat.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
The captain calls, you listen.
Coming up, George Follmer on winning the 1972 Can-Am for Penske and Porsche. And later on, the more things change, the more they stay the same. You're watching Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3 on Speed. Welcome back to Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3 at Daytona. The success that Porsche and Roger Penske have achieved together in American road racing is embodied by two cars, the awesome Can-Am 917-30 of the 70s and the RS Spyder of today's American Le Mans Series. But Porsche and Penske's initial joint venture came 35 years ago with the 917-10.
Since 1967, the Canadian-American Challenge Cup Series for Group 7 cars has been dominated by the orange machines of the powerful McLaren team. In 1972, however, the Porsche 917-10 appeared. Powered by a 300 cubic inch 12-cylinder turbocharged engine producing close to 1,000 horsepower, it was a definite threat to the McLaren supremacy.
Mossport, near Toronto, was where the car debuted after extensive testing in the hands of Mark Donohue.
When actual practice started for the race, we were really thrilled to see that our car appeared to be anyway quicker than our competition was at the same time on the racetrack.
Donohue put the 917-10 on pole at Mossport before finishing second due to a minor mechanical issue. The next round was Road Atlanta. In pre-race testing, one man's misfortune became another man's opportunity of a lifetime.
During that test, the tail section came off the actual race car, and I crashed, seriously injuring my leg.
I was contacted immediately following Mark's accident by John Woodard.
I said, Mark, there's some body work we got to finish here. It's not ready to go. He destroyed the brand new magnesium car. George Fulmer was brought in overnight to drive the aluminum car in the race that weekend.
Well, I get this phone call from Roger Penske and wanting me to, says, can you come to Atlanta, that Mark just got hurt, and my first answer was, how's Mark?
So the stage was set, and the chance of taking the championship away from McLaren loomed large in the eyes of the team.
I didn't know what I really had in the Porsche at that point because it was a different car.
Fulmer was able to tame the beast, qualifying second and taking the first of 6 victories with the 917-10. Later in the year, Donohue returned in time to watch Fulmer clinch the championship. The reign of the McLaren Can-Am juggernaut was over.
The fact that we did a thing with Porsche in their first real effort at Can-Am racing in the United States and to come home with a championship, I think it made everybody very happy. Certainly made me happy. And I think Porsche was too.
The following year, Mark Donohue drove the 917-30, an even more powerful twin-turbocharged model, to another Can-Am title. In 1975, he piloted this same car to a world closed-course speed record of more than 221 miles per hour at Talladega Superspeedway in Alabama. It was a record that would stand for many years. Just days later, however, Donohue lost his life while testing a Formula One car. His son David, an accomplished racing driver in his own right, was only 8 years old at the time. Coming to Rennsport helped David learn more about his late father.
It's a fantastic experience. You know, I've had the opportunity to drive the museum car, and this is Matt Drendel's 917-30, and it's just an absolute immaculate example of one of these cars. And it's just a privilege to be able to sit here and see exactly what my father was looking at when he was so dominant in the Can-Am series. And it's funny, this is the first time I actually sat in one of my dad's seats, and fits like a glove. It's great. I'm just really proud of him and what he had accomplished. I'm speechless.
A great moment, as is this one. Woody Woodard and George Fulmer greeting each other in person for the first time since that championship season 35 years ago. Now, this little guy may someday drive racing cars. The one he's sitting in took part in the most exciting race of the day. We'll check that out next at Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3. Welcome back to Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3 at Daytona, where the high banks were made for great racing, and that's just what we saw in the Group 4 race for Porsche models 906 through 917. The main protagonists were Jim Torres in the yellow 4.5-liter 917-30 and Phil Dagrapont in a 3-liter 908-03. Back and forth the two went, but in the end it would be Torres in the last 917-30 ever built, formerly owned by Wacek Polak, overpowering Dagrapont to take the win.
Okay, is this the guy? Boy, how you doing, big guy? That's racing. That's racing.
Congratulations, Jim, on a job well done. Now to Justin Bell.
Now this is what I'm talking about. In the end, it gets down to having some fun yourself, and what an experience this is, getting the chance to drive a brand new Porsche. I'm gonna go and see if I can kind of con my way into a ride. Now this is what I call hands-on fun at Rennsport. A brilliant new addition gives the member of the public a real taste for what it's like to get behind the wheel of a new 2008 Porsche Cayman. Everybody has paid $10 each to do this drive for Camp Boggy Creek, and they've had over 600 people so far do it. Work out the math. Getting behind the wheel is a tremendous experience, but let's not just take my word for it. Let's go and see some people that have just got out. Was that fun?
Oh, it's fabulous, fabulous. Great handling, wonderful brakes.
So the plan does work, Bill.
Some folks have never experienced our cars. They are just absolutely thrilled. Look at the faces of the people who get out of the cars. This is probably one of the ultimate test drives for folks, to actually come out here and experience these cars in this environment with the professional instructor next to them. It works really, really well for us. As we like to say, this is the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
And we'll take Bill's word for that, because I don't want to see him undress. And Karen, it was fun to watch you drive around. Good luck, guys.
Thanks, Justin. Now, 2007 marks the 25th anniversary of the racing debut of the Porsche 956. Together with its sister model, the 962, these Porsche prototypes are the most successful race cars in the history of international sports car endurance racing. Their victories span 2 decades, including 7 overall wins at Le Mans, 6 at the Rolex 24 at Daytona, and 4 at the 12 Hours of Sebring. Porsche began work on the 956 in 1981, designed for the new FIA Group C category.
Peter Schutz, the then head of the company, said, "We're going to go to Group C next year and we'd like to be part of the team." And I'm going, "Group C? What's that?"
It was first car not with a tube frame. It was first car with a monocoque. It was a special aluminium stuff from the airplane systems.
They couldn't make a tubular chassis into a ground effect car because of the fact that underneath the car you had all this floor, these tunnels underneath.
Most important thing we start with is ground effect. That was complete new for Porsche.
But to fill the engine bay, Porsche stuck with a proven unit, the 2.65-liter flat-six twin-turbo that had powered the 936 model to victory at Le Mans in June of 1981. It was also the engine originally targeted for Porsche's aborted 1980 IndyCar project.
There were major challenges, obviously, to putting this horizontally opposed engine, and so they canted the engine up at a slight angle so that we could get this airflow underneath at the back.
On March 27, 1982, just 10 months after approval of the project, chassis 001 was complete. Jürgen Barth first drove it at the company's Weissach test track.
It was a great moment when we started the car and going around the first 3-4 laps and coming in to check if everything was going well.
After the first rollout, Mr. Falk put a bottle champagne over the car. Normally we are not so happy because better is to drink this stuff, but it's good memory.
The 956 not only won overall at Le Mans in its debut, it swept the top 3 places, an astonishing achievement in what was only the car's second race.
I went there thinking that the car would be good, it would be strong, it would be reliable, and we would do a good job because we were the best group of drivers between us all that the team could find.
I remember arriving and actually seeing the car for the first time, and I thought, oh God, this is really beautiful. This is a real kick to drive this thing.
I remember Jackie Hicks writing to me one year, and he just said, we have to have the best designers, the best engineers, the best mechanics, the best tyres, the best drivers, and then the best of luck. And that's what we got, with the chance to come first, second, and third. I mean, I've seen thousands of photographs of us coming through that chicane on the last lap, sort of honking through 1, 2, 3. I mean, the crowd just descend on the track. It was a dream, wasn't it?
Bringing the story full circle, here is the original chassis at Rennsport. 956 number 001, the very car Jürgen Barth drove on that cold day in 1982 at Weissach. 25 years old and beautiful as ever. Coming up, American Porsche factory driver Patrick Long's first dance with the beautiful 962. And we'll remember the Holbert family's many contributions to Porsche. We'll be back to Daytona in just a moment. A few days after Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3, Bob Holbert, patriarch of the racing Holbert family, passed away in his native Warrington, Pennsylvania. One of the first Porsche dealers in North America, as well as a prominent Porsche racer in the 1950s and 60s, Bob Hulbert was 84 years old. Perhaps no person has had a greater association with the Porsche 962 in this country than the late Al Hulbert. Building on his father Bob's legacy, Al Hulbert co-drove 956s and 962s to a pair of victories at Le Mans. As lead driver for his own team, Hulbert Racing, Al won the Rolex 24 at Daytona twice and captured 2 IMSA Camel GT Drivers' Championships. The story of the 962 begins in August of 1983 when Porsche sought permission to race the 956 in America. Before they could do that, John Bishop, president of the sanctioning International Motorsports Association, insisted on changes to both the engine and the cockpit.
When John Bishop was telling Porsche that this 956 was not going to be legal in the United States because the driver's feet were in front of the center line of the front axle, and you have to make a whole new car, I don't think he, in his wildest imagination, ever thought that Porsche would do that.
But do it they did, and the Americanized version of the 956 became the 962. Powered by the single-turbo, air-cooled flat six from the Porsche 935, Mario Andretti put the new car on pole for the 1984 Daytona 24 Hours by 2 seconds.
The car finished then, I think, after 4 or 5 hours with a broken gearbox. But it showed his potential.
Immediately thereafter, orders began to roll in for the new car. Al Hulbert received chassis number 3, and he and Derek Bell promptly went out and won with it at Mid-Ohio.
Al was just the greatest engineer, the greatest technician. He knew so much about the car. And at the end of the day, he was a magnificent driver.
As president of Porsche Motorsport North America, Hulbert led the ongoing development of the 962, making it a very good car for anyone who raced one.
It was a very drivable, friendly car. We had a lot of great, colorful people, Bruce Levin and Bob Aiken and Rob Dyson. They were all guys that loved to drive and to own the teams, and then they would hire pro guys to drive with them, so it all worked out pretty good.
I showed up this morning with a cup of coffee in my hand and started talking to a few people like the old days. It's my first Rennsport Reunion, it's my first time in a Group C car, so a lot of new things going on.
Patrick Long, the only American Porsche factory driver, hopped into a 962 for the first time ever. He qualified the car, owned by Paul Thiem of Marquette, Michigan, on the front row for the Group 5 race alongside Lloyd Hawkins. But it was third starter Mark Hotchkiss who grabbed the early lead. Down the backstretch, entering the chicane on the final lap, Long passed Hotchkiss back. Like so many young drivers before him, Long's first flirtation with the Porsche 962 was a winning one, flat out through the banking in turn 4. At the flag, Long and the Hulbert Special won over Hotchkiss and Hawkins, driving a 962C.
Well done. That was hard work.
Michael Barsh, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of Sales for Porsche Cars North America, presented Patrick with his trophy. On the downside, Rennsport organizer Brian Redmond suffered engine problems, and Derek Bell was unable to build turbo boost and finish 6th. Very different than 20 years ago when Derek won here at the Rolex 24. That race was run in hot conditions, which took their toll on teammates Chip Robinson and Al Unser Jr.
And I was 45 or 40-something, and I was in with these young 30-year-olds, 25 to 30-year-olds, and I thought at least I can rely on the young guys, and I never remember it so well. It came to like 2 hours or 2.5 hours to go, and I got out absolutely exhausted because I think we had a broken window on the side, and of course you're sitting there just sucking this heat out of the engine module into the cockpit. So I came in the motorhome, and I said, "Okay, Chip, not long to go," and I looked, Chip's out. I mean, he was flat out. Anyway, after about half an hour, the call comes in, "Derek, little Al's getting out. He can't handle it anymore. It's too hot and he's exhausted." I went, "That's really good. The old 45-year-old man's absolutely rooted here, and my young stars have had it." Meanwhile, I'm still in agony. I'm hopping, and every time I lift the glass up, my arm goes here, cramp everywhere. So I said, "I know, go and get Al Hulbert. He's in the pit, overseeing the pit for his own team." Next thing is he's in the car, and he says, "I'll do the next hour, but I insist that Derek does the last hour." And then after 30 minutes, 35 minutes, he says, "Al's coming in 2 laps." I went, "Oh no." Suddenly, adrenaline rushes around the body. I leapt up, socks, underwear on, top on, jacket on. Off I went and out to the car and jumped in, and we went through and won the race.
In all, the 962 took 6 wins at the Rolex, 4 at Sebring, and 3 at Le Mans. But before his death in a 1988 plane crash, Al Holbert felt the 962 was getting long in the tooth.
The day that Al had his accident and died, in the morning he and I had been talking, and he said, come over here, I've got something to show you. It was a model of the car. He said, this is the car that you and I are going to race next year. But of course it wasn't to be. And so prematurely, our whole program stopped, and tragically so too.
In a special ceremony at Daytona, Al Holbert's many contributions to Porsche were recognized. His son Todd was on hand to accept the appreciation. Coming to Rennsport brought back some fond memories for Todd.
Getting to see all the 962s and the 956s that we spent so much time, back in the mid 80s, in which a lot of them I was around for, and so for me to get to see those things, 20 years later, is pretty neat.
Like his father, Todd Holbert is an engineer, chief engineer, in fact, for Toyota's NASCAR Craftsman truck. So it was memorable to see him drive the very same 962 that Father Al used to win the Rolex 24 in 1986 and 87. It's been a wonderful weekend here at Daytona International Speedway for the Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3. Before we go, we'd like to present the winners of the Concours de Sport, a close look at some of the greatest Porsches to be found anywhere. Special kudos must go to Joe Buzetta of St. James, New York, whose 1969 Porsche 908026 was not only a class winner, but was selected as Best in Show. Congratulations, Joe. Time now to sum up the essence of Porsche Rennsport Reunion 3, beginning with the worldwide head of Porsche Motorsport, Mr. Hartmut Christen.
Rennsport in German means racing. The racing heritage of Porsche in one word. It's the old word that was used in German and that actually led to the model designation RS. So it still means a lot to us.
Inside Roman Dumas, side by side they hit, and he pushes Emanuele Pirro out of the way. What an amazing performance. And they do it. Penske does it in Detroit.
The RS Spyder has been an absolutely wonderful success story for Porsche in 2006 and in 2007 with a spectacular year, scoring 8 overall victories in the American Le Mans Series. Porsche is kind of revisiting its history, its racing history, with a car that again is a giant killer. The RS Spyder is a throwback to the 550 Spyder, sort of its namesake. And the 550 Spyder was the first pure racing car that Porsche built, and it was the car that we scored our first major international victory at the Targa Florio. An outstanding handling, lightweight car with impressive power output from a small displacement engine. It's important for a company not just to rely on its past successes, but also its current successes, and have things in the works for optimistic future successes.
Well, with that, it's time to bring this 1-hour look at the entire Rennsport Reunion weekend to a close. Derek, your final thoughts on what we've seen?
Well, what we've seen a complete history of Porsche racing, 50 years of it. And without these magnificent cars we've seen here this weekend, there wouldn't have been any sport car racing for the last 50 years.
Well, at the risk of embarrassing my colleague here, I'll say the high point for me is watching the great Porsche drivers get together and relive all the old tales. We hope you've enjoyed it and make plans 3 years from now for Porsche Rennsport Reunion 4. Until then, for Derek and Justin Bell, I'm Bob Barsha. So long from Daytona International Speedway.
That way, okay. We'll bring the 962s back next. All right, I was trying to get the 17, 10s, and 30s in one row, but if you want to get the PA in there, back another half.
Straight.
Cut her in.